those individuals who think marriage is horrible and, it's just a cause of problems and chaos, then it's a matter of adjusting their expectations.
Sometimes parents want to choose spouse for their children. And they overdo.
So parents need to do their part about providing opportunities, but allowing their children to go through the selection process and finding someone that they can actually connect with.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm delighted to have Sister Haleh Banani today, who is serving the Muslim community in a fascinating way for more than 20 years. She has masters in clinical psychology and has been serving thousands worldwide in the Muslim community since 1998. She launched a global mentorship program 3 years ago for sisters called the Mindful Hearts Academy, which transforms lives by empowering women to be the best version of themselves. So thank you, Sister Haleh, for attending and giving time here.
Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure to be here.
So what inspired you to do counseling starting from 1998? It's not very common in Muslim community anyway.
It wasn't common at all. Actually, I didn't know another Muslim therapist. It was something that it was a very strong calling that I had. I wanted to help transform people's lives. And I knew that psychology was the way to do it. And so I went against the family, community members in doing the psychology because it was very much a passion of mine.
So you are very famous for your family bonding, marriage-related talks and programs, particularly 5 pillars of marriage program is, something that is very popular and beneficial, mashallah. So can you let's dive deep today on family bonding and relationship and marriage, because that is something that is a very big concern and issue. So starting there, why do you think, Sister Haleh, with your tremendous experience for almost 25 years now, why do you think that so many marriages are, breaking apart? What are you would say that few key reasons that we are not able to protect our families together?
Right. We are facing a tremendous amount of breakdown of the family. And one of the reasons I would say is a lack of, first of all, role models. Many of the people that I work with, their parents fought, they had divorce, they didn't have a good relationship. So there's a lack of leadership, lack of role models. There's a lack of skill set. Right, that many people, they don't know how to resolve their conflict. They don't know how to express themselves without being threatening, without causing a problem. And so the marriage skills, and you brought up the 5 pillars of marriage, and this is exactly why my husband and I put this program together. We spent about 3 years in putting this together to teach people step by step how to have those life skills, how to resolve the conflict. Because when someone does not have the tools, then they're going to struggle in their marriage. An analogy I like to use is like when someone goes camping. And if they don't have anything, if they don't have the equipment, they don't have the tent, they don't have the food, they don't have the light, they're going to have a horrible time. But someone who goes camping and they're fully equipped and they have all the tools that they need, they will really enjoy it. So it really is a lack of skill set that they need to develop.
Which exact skill do you consider is the most important to learn for people who are married or planning to get married?
Well, you'll be surprised by my answer. I would say that having self-esteem and working within yourself, like in the 5 pillars of marriage, we work on the first pillar is all about developing yourself. Because if you are taking care of yourself emotionally, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, and you're in a better place, then you come into the marriage ready to give, and you have a very profound impact, a positive impact. So when someone starts within themselves, and they feel good, they're not relying on someone else to make them happy, they feel that sense of confidence and internal peace, then that really is the basis of a good relationship.
I completely agree with you. And I always tell it to my clients as well that if you are looking for the right spouse, then you first need to ask, where do you stand? Like, what's your own narrative? What's your own
Yes.
self-esteem? If you don't know yourself, you don't know who you are looking for.
Exactly, exactly. And when someone is insecure, then they're going to be intimidated, they're going to be possessive. It's going to lead to a lot of problems. Now, once someone has their own self-esteem, then I would say it's very critical to know how to communicate, how to resolve conflict, and how to build a friendship. Having a friendship with your spouse. They've done like 40 years of research, marriage research, and they have found that the marriages that last throughout the years, whether it's for 30, 40, we just met some couples. I was just in South Africa for a marriage conference, and the people running it, mashallah, were nearing 60 years of being happily married. And so they have found that the key ingredient is having a friendship with your spouse.
Right. So if I just go back and see the common questions that people have before marriage in Bangladesh and around the world, is that in modern days, in hyper-capitalistic world, sometimes marriage is not seen as a place of harmony. Sometimes marriage is portrayed as a place of chaos. So almost every day we'll have 17 or 27-year-old girl showing up in the center and saying that I never want to get married. What's the point of I want to travel the whole world. I want to be free, independent. Marriage will make my life chaotic, problematic. My father wasn't a good person, or my brother is not the best person. And I have seen marriages make my mom's life miserable. I don't want to face that misery. So what do you say to them? What's your approach to them?
Right. Well, this is very common here in the States as well. You find many young adults coming in and saying, I will never get married. And going back to what I said that they didn't have good role models. They've seen people who are miserable. So one of the things I start off with, and actually we discuss it as well on the program, is having the right mindset. You have to have the right mindset and adjust your expectations. So those individuals who think marriage is horrible and it's just a cause of problems and chaos, then it's a matter of adjusting their expectations and telling them that this can be actually an amazing relationship depending on what you're bringing into it, and reminding them that they don't have to imitate their parents in this, that they're very different, especially when they get educated and when they have role models and they see the example of a good marriage, and they say you could have a very different relationship than your parents. So having that positive outlook, we know how much that impacts us from a psychological perspective in what you're expecting. And as far as expectation, you find that there are two extremes. So one extreme is the one you're talking about, where someone will say, I hate marriage, I never want to get married, this is going to be horrible. And then the other extreme is people expecting it to be like a fairy tale, expecting it to be like Hollywood or Bollywood. And so it's about really adjusting their expectations and having a positive outlook towards marriage.
So what is a good way to someone who's not willing to get married, and a woman, especially particularly, whose age is 27, as a therapist, what can be a good approach to show them the pros and cons of marriage?
Right. Well, when I find a young woman who is not getting married, I try to break it down and find out what is the fear. It's definitely motivated by fear, maybe the fear of loss of independence, the fear of being mistreated, the fear of maybe having restrictions. And so we really need to analyze this and find out, where does this stem from? How much of it is based on on reality, how much of it is maybe catastrophizing, right? Because one of the thought disorders is catastrophizing, and many young adults do that in that they just see the worst case scenario and they imagine it the worst. And so we have to go through and find out what are some of the fears. They're legitimate fears, and we can address those fears. And it has a lot to do with the choice you make, right? So you can marry someone and definitely lead to having a very restrictive, difficult life if you don't choose the right person. So it's about teaching the individual how to go through the search, how to select someone that will be more compatible. So if a person, let's say she's very independent and she's educated, she wants to continue working, she needs to make sure that when she is finding an individual that she's talking to, that person is open-minded, is okay with, with his wife working. There has to be a lot of communication, and the selection process is very important, not just for your thoughts about marriage, because you could have all these wonderful thoughts about marriage, and then if you're not selective in who you're choosing, then all of your biggest nightmares might come true.
Right. That's a very important point. Sometimes people rush during the selection process. This podcast episode is sponsored by FoodnFlavours. FoodnFlavours না থাকলে আমি জানতামই না যে আমিও অসাধারণ রান্না করতে পারি। আমার কখনোই রান্না করা হয়নি, এবং FoodnFlavours আমার মতো ব্যস্ত মানুষদের জন্য এমন একটা মিল কিট নিয়ে এসেছে যে মিল কিটে সব কিছু ফ্রেশ, অর্গানিক, এবং আমি উইদিন 10 to 20 মিনিটসে আমার বিজি লাইফের মধ্যে কিন্তু আমি কুক করতে পারছি। আইটেমগুলো আপনারা ট্রাই করতে পারেন। আই এম শিওর ইউ উইল লাভ ইট। নিচের লিঙ্কটা ক্লিক করবেন আরো ডিটেলসের জন্য। Maybe they delegate selection entirely on someone else, like their parents, so which is a disaster. So what would you suggest to the parents as well? Because sometimes parents want to choose spouse for their children. So, and they overdo, you know what I mean? So
right.
what can be a healthy approach for a parents when they want the best for their children, but at the same time they don't understand, sometimes they need to step back a bit?
Right. Well, I'm so glad that you asked this question. It's a very critical one. And my advice to the parents, first of all, is I understand that culturally many families do the arranged marriages. Okay. And that's not necessarily completely disastrous. Many times I've had clients who will get married through arranged marriages, and it can work. The key is making sure that the children have the last say as far as whether they are attracted or not, whether they see compatibility or not. So it's what would be called like semi-arranged, where, okay, we are setting up these people. These are families we know. They have, let's say they have children that is in the right age group, and giving their children the opportunity to meet, to interact, and for them to make the final decision as far as if there's compatibility, if there's a connection. Many times we put so much emphasis on the maybe just the culture they're from, like it has to be from this country and this profession, right? So, okay, he's from Bangladesh and he's a doctor, we're set. This is going to be a great marriage. And not necessarily. So we have to do a lot more searching rather than just what ethnicity or what profession the person studies. There is the seeing if the personalities match, seeing if you have the same life vision. You have individuals that marry a person that is not at all religious, and religion is a very important part in their life. So they find themselves very unhappy. There might be individuals who there's extreme extrovert marrying an extreme introvert, and it wasn't that they were attracted to each other. When they say opposites attract, but they find that they're constantly feeling unfulfilled in their marriage because of the lack of compatibility. So parents need to do their part about providing opportunities, but allowing their children to go through the selection process and finding someone that they can actually connect with. I've had clients who force their kids, or they try to, let's say, strongly encourage them to marry someone that they're not even attracted to. And I've had to talk to community members, sometimes even friends, and say, this is not someone you're marrying. Your child, your daughter is getting married. If she's not attracted to her husband, this is going to lead to major problems later on. So allowing them to decide based on their likes and dislikes.
Right. No, absolutely. So if we go a bit forward and modern day challenges of marriage, so one of the things that is, sometimes a point of conflict is rights and responsibility between husband and wife. So we can all agree that irresponsibility is a red card. But defining irresponsibility is sometimes difficult. So we are probably the first generation where in large scale, we have our women who are working and earning as well. Earlier generations, mostly, not all the time, but mostly women were not working. Women were mainly doing household chores. Now it's very common in all communities, including Muslim communities, that many women are working and earning alongside their partner. So what happens is, regarding, whether both of us should share, the home rent, kids' schools, bills, you know what I mean? So in every discussion, there is sometimes conflict between who should do what. How much should the husbands support in the family chores? How much should the wife support financially? So definitely it will vary from family to family, because different family has different realities, So what can be a few guiding principles to ease up this uncomfortable but necessary discussion?
Right. It is causing a lot of tension within marriages when you have a dual family income, and it's putting a lot of stress on the division of labor and who does what. Now, I mean, Islamically, we know that the man is responsible financially for the household, right? And I understand that sometimes the financial situation varies. It's very important for the man to understand his, let's say, the responsibility, and recognize that if they are in a financial crisis and the wife is working and she chooses to contribute, this is a contribution. It is not something that should be forced upon a woman. Right. So this is an important understanding, because sometimes we are so affected by the West, and we start imitating the West, as in like everything's 50-50. And many men have been, I've heard a lot of complaints from my clients that they're not even supporting their wives financially. So the wife will have to support herself. So it's a matter of understanding, first of all, religiously the obligation, and then recognizing that if there is a situation where the wife can contribute and work and help with the finances, that is the way to do it, really, because you're one team, you're working on raising one family. And if you can do that, then every penny, every cent that you spend is actually a sadaqah, right? It's written as a sadaqah for the woman. And so being understanding, my mom used to work, she was an entrepreneur, she was a fashion designer, and I saw very good cohesiveness with my father. He contributed, he helped out in the house, he helped out even with the cooking, and there was this feeling of being supported, right? Because she was supporting financially and he was supporting in the home. So that's a really nice example to have, where you both feel this sense of responsibility to step in and do whatever you can, and not to have that mindset of 50-50. keeping track, keeping a scorecard is disastrous in a marriage, right? So there are times maybe it has to be 60-40. Sometimes it has to be 80-20, depending on what you're going through, right? So being very cognizant of the fact that you are, and it all boils down to accountability and God consciousness, right? That's why, like, the third pillar on the 5 pillars of marriage program that we have, it's all about God consciousness, your connection with Allah, because a God conscious person, a person who knows that they are being graded as a spouse, is not going to take advantage of their spouse. They're not going to be irresponsible if that is an important priority for them. So it's coming in with that mindset that I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this work. I will contribute financially. I will help out wherever it's needed, and seeing each other, seeing yourselves as one team. We just finished watching, the World Cup, and we saw how important it is with the teamwork that's involved, that everyone's working together towards one goal. And if the teammates are tripping each other up, there's no way that they could win, right? And many times you find that a husband and wife, they're tripping each other up. They're going against the person.
They're competing.
They're competing. They see their spouse as an opponent, and that there's no way to succeed if you are doing that. You have to see yourself as a team, that you're working towards a common goal, and that you should contribute whatever it takes to make it work.
So just to compliment with you on adding 2 points with it, is that one is that sometimes between husband and wife, equality is unfair in every small things. If everything we want to make equal, sometimes it will be unfair. Like, for example, a woman becoming a mom is a heavy load. You cannot really make it, like breastfeeding or pregnancy or delivering a child. If you try to make it equal for the husband and the wife, you will make it unfair. And sometimes what is graceful but unfair is, what is graceful and fair is not always equal. Like, for example, husband carrying the luggage for the wife is fair but not equal, because both of them are not carrying the same amount of weight, because they are not physically, they are not same. So there is fairness is more important than equality. So that's number one. And number two is that I think that you cannot always solve this puzzle of rights and responsibility with logic. Sometimes there needs to be a graceful approach. It's so easy to solve some puzzles with grace, which doesn't match with logic. And
right. And Allah says, وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, right? That Allah has put that love and mercy in your hearts. And so what you're referring to is the mercy that we need to have for one another. We need to recognize when someone is just, they're just exhausted. Maybe it was the husband who's working long hours and he just needs a break. Maybe it's the wife who's been with 4 kids all day and she needs a break. And when you have that mercy in your heart for your spouse, and you come in with that mentality, and you ask yourself, how can I light up my spouse today? How can I make him feel appreciated? How can I make him feel loved? How can I be supportive? Very few people ask these kind of questions. Most individuals is all about like me, my needs, my rights. And very few people are interested in making the other person happy.
So going forward, you touched a very important point, is that sometimes what happens, we see in couples showing up and saying that where the husband feels disrespected by wife's approach, her way of talking, the way she is speaking, the way she is behaving, the husband is always like, I feel disrespected. And because of that, I don't feel, connected, or I don't feel like making love. On the other hand, sometimes the wife, she is craving for attention. She's complaining that my husband is not romantic, or is not playful, is not cheerful. my husband doesn't look at me properly, doesn't smile at me properly. This
Mm-hmm.
is probably one of the most common questions, where the husband
Right.
is craving for respect and the wife is complaining for emotional intimacy and attention, and both of them are frustrated in every possible way. So what are some simple guiding principles to help them?
Right. Well, first of all, we need to realize that every household has unspoken rules about respect. So the husband was raised in one household, the wife was raised in another, and with very different guidelines. And this is something no one really talks about. And so the wife may be administering her rules of respect. Maybe in her home, respect was about speaking up, sharing your ideas, making sure that you're heard and understood. Now, in his household, maybe respect was lowering your gaze. You don't look at authority. You don't speak up. You don't defend yourself. And so they are applying their rules of respect. However, it contradicts one another. So very important when couples get married at the very beginning to understand what are the rules of respect, because most likely you're going to have to come up with your own rules. You sometimes have to abandon some of the things that you did in your household because it's going to be of conflict with your spouse. So understanding the origin and recognizing what is respectful, how do you want to be treated with respect? Anytime a man, in a marriage counseling session says, I want respect, I want to be respected, I want them to tell me behaviorally, what does she need to do? Right? Because when you just say, I need more respect, and I am respecting him, I respect him all the time, not recognizing that there are different rules. So that will make a big difference in understanding where this, where's the expectation of the respect, and then recognizing that it is so critical that the curtain of respect should never be torn down. If you start saying rude curse words to each other, when you say belittling things, the sarcasm, the talking about your spouse to others, this will really tear the relationship apart. And so, and it can happen both ways, right? It could be the man disrespecting the wife as well. And what I have found is that there's a lot of almost like role reversals in a way, where many of the men are asking for that emotional connection before getting intimate as well. So in the past, it was seen generally as this is something that the woman needs, and the man, regardless of how he's feeling, he would want to get intimate. However, I'm seeing that many men will withhold intimacy because my wife was yelling at me all day. She was so rude to me. And then she wants to get intimate, and I don't feel that connection. So there is a need for that emotional connection before being intimate. And this is what's interesting, is this is why we made physical intimacy the fifth pillar. First is about yourself, then it's about the friendship, then it's the God consciousness, then it's conflict resolution, and then fifth pillar is physical intimacy. These things, if we don't address them and they're not in place, no one's going to want to be intimate. Right? If you've been disrespected, if you've been yelled at, if you feel that person is being very selfish, they're not in any way being God conscious, if they're not spending time with you, then that is not going to happen. So it's really important. I tell a lot of the brothers that the foreplay starts first thing in the morning. How do you greet your wife? How do you, are there compliments that are given? Do you help out? Do you help out with the chores, with the kids? And, for the wife as well, how appreciative are you being towards your spouse? Are you complimenting him? Are you giving sweet words? Or are there texts going back and forth, being mad at each other?
No. So moving forward to the fifth pillar a bit, after in LifeSpring we started counseling, and almost 50% of our clients are regarding relationship.
Right.
Then eventually we were sort of forced, I would say, ethically to go into sexual health. Why? Because the problem is so large, both for men and both for women. But in Muslim communities, it's very uncommon and sometimes uncomfortable to talk about the importance of sexual health, although that is extremely necessary because many families are breaking apart for that. So, let's talk a little bit about it. Is that sometimes in Muslim faith-based communities, what happens is we think that sex education of any form is bad, is taboo, and is problematic. It's somehow making people erotic in the wrong, inappropriate way. But we do see in Muslim communities, even in very pious religious families, that there is deep frustration and deep desperation, and sometimes husband and wife are not doing something that is playful and natural. So in your experience of 20 plus years, how to break down this uncomfortable but necessary topic?
Yeah, it is very important. I remember the first time I was asked to talk about physical intimacy. It took me like about a year of contemplation, because as a conservative Muslim woman, is this appropriate? I asked so many of the shuyukh, and it really boiled down to the fact that it is darura, that it is something that is so necessary. And I've seen when there's a breakdown of the physical intimacy, what it leads to. It leads to infidelity. So many of the couples that I work with, and they're all Muslims, they face infidelity. They're cheating on their wives. Sometimes the women are cheating because of this lack of fulfillment. And something that the Prophet ﷺ said, he praised the women of the Ansar, that their modesty did not prevent them from asking about the sexual relationship. So modesty is good. We need to honor that. But at the same time, we need to be able to talk about this openly in a very dignified manner in order to ensure that the relationship, the marital relationship, is fortified, and it is, you bulletproof it from the infidelity. So that that's a very critical part of it.
If you can, from your experience, if you can talk a little bit about how porn addiction or things like OnlyFans or how these are affecting communities and breaking families apart, and how they're deeply troubling the relationships from your experience.
Right. It is. What I'm seeing is that many people are relying on pornography to educate themselves because they're not getting the talk. I gave a presentation here in Dallas, and it was about 100 youth, 50 girls, 50 boys. And I found that with the boys, they were exposed to everything. So whether they saw it through porn, whether they actually took part in it, so they came in with really intense expectations. And many of the women were very sheltered. Obviously, there are exceptions. They may be exposed as well. They may take practice. They may practice some of it. But overall, I saw that there was such a discrepancy between what the guys were exposed to, what the girls were exposed to. And it leads to, it is really damaging when you're getting your sexual education through pornography. Because what I always explain, especially to the men, is that it's like watching a sci-fi movie. You watch a sci-fi movie and you try to act it out. I mean, it's not realistic. These people are acting, and then it affects your expectations of your spouse. You could never be fully satisfied because, first of all, you're so stimulated by all the different images, the variety, and this leads to actually erectile dysfunction within a marriage. And The young man could be in his 20s and suffer from this. So there is a website. Or
premature ejaculation sometimes.
Right. There's a website. It's not a Muslim website, but it says Your Brain on Porn. Okay, Your Brain on Porn is saying how that impacts you and how it affects your relationship with your spouse. Now, the woman will always feel that if their husband is watching this pornography, it is just as hurtful as being cheated on, right? So they view it in a light that it's like unacceptable, and because it's hurtful. You're looking at someone else in order to be stimulated. And a lot of men look at it as, well, it's not hurting anyone. I'm not like physical with this person. I'm just viewing it. But what they don't realize, that all the layers of impact that it has on them.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about moving on the next issues that really bother in the relationship is bickering. So sometimes husband and wife are bickering all the time on nitty-gritty issues, which is making them feel bad about each other, and also children are getting affected. So what we see among couples in our context, mostly in Bangladesh, whether Bangladesh is living in USA or in Dhaka, what we see is that parents are bickering about the children, and children are upset because they see a broken relationship. Sometimes when husband and wife become parents, they forget that they are also husband and wife. They're not only father and mother. So children become a barrier between husband and wife, not a bridge. This podcast episode is sponsored by FoodnFlavours. FoodnFlavours না থাকলে আমি জানতামই না যে আমিও অসাধারণ রান্না করতে পারি। আমার কখনোই রান্না করা হয়নি, এবং FoodnFlavours আমার মতো ব্যস্ত মানুষদের জন্য এমন একটা মিল কিট নিয়ে এসেছে, যে মিল কিটে সবকিছু ফ্রেশ, অর্গানিক, এবং আমি উইদিন 10 to 20 মিনিটসে আমার বিজি লাইফের মধ্যে কিন্তু আমি কুক করতে পারছি। আইটেমগুলো আপনারা ট্রাই করতে পারেন। আই এম শিওর ইউ উইল লাভ ইট। নিচের লিংকটা ক্লিক করবেন আরো ডিটেইলসের জন্য। So from your experience, could you share a bit on how bickering affects and impact of quality of relationship with your husband and wife on children's development?
Oh, it's huge. It is huge. And when you create a harmonious household where the husband and wife are dealing with each other with love, with respect, this will create and foster children who are confident and at peace. So the marriage is basically the soil in which the children grow in. And if you have a soil that it's rotted, then it's definitely going to impact the children. And what I have found is that whenever there's a dysfunctional household with the husband and wife fighting, bickering, yelling, and sometimes people say, oh, we don't fight, but there is a cold war going on. There is ignoring one another, not talking for months at a time, tension. This will lead the children to having mental health disorders. It's pretty much guaranteed. I have not seen a dysfunctional household where the children are not suffering from, whether it's anxiety, depression, they may have eating disorders, they may have OCD, they have some kind of issues that come up. So it's, and a lot of people will make the mistake and they will say that, I fight with my husband all the time, but I'm staying for the kids. And it's a misconception that the best thing for the kids is when the parents are together. There's a very important clause. It's good for the kids when the parents are together if there's respect, if there is love, if there's a good relationship. And if you don't have those things and you just stick the kids in an environment that there's constant fighting, those kids, those young adults, when I do sessions with them, they tell me, I wish my parents got a divorce. I wish they did not subject us to that kind of fighting. So make sure that when you're staying in the marriage, it's not simply, if you're saying it's for the kids, great. However, work on your marriage. You can't take care of your kids in isolation. If you're having a horrible relationship with your spouse, you can't think that your kids are going to turn out great despite the horrible relationship. Either you have to get a divorce and get out of that abusive, toxic relationship, or you massively change yourself and change the relationship in order to create a harmonious household.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's very important. Before going into divorce, I'll definitely ask a question about divorce. I want to, ask a concern about, being overly involved online, always checking social media, when always looking at the phone. So this is creating a huge issue because sometimes husband and wife, after they come back from office or their work, they're constantly in social media. They don't have time for each other. Scrolling through Facebook is sometimes more interesting. They find more interesting than, talking with their spouse, and both the spouse feel, disturbed and, abandoned. Disconnected. Yeah. So like, it is a burning issue because it is burning the families,
Right. One of the advice I give to couples who complain about that, and it's very common, is having a phone-free time. Right? You have to designate time, maybe definitely meal time. For us, mealtime, we don't have our phones. And we have grown children, mashallah, at ages 23, 20, and 18. However, we're very particular about that bonding period, that we're not on the phone, we're connected, and we share at that time, or an hour before bedtime, because many couples end up being on their phone until they fall asleep. So that's a very critical time of bonding, right before sleep. So if you can designate a phone-free zone, right? So meal times, an hour before bed. Excuse me. I had this one brother who had a major issue. He was a workaholic. He was always on his phone, and his wife was really fed up. And one of the things, he was really committed to saving the marriage. And so he would come home and put his phone in the closet. And you can't imagine what an impact this had, because he was finally present. Because you could be sitting there next to a person, but if you're on your phone, you're not emotionally present. And so just by disconnecting from the devices, it gave him the opportunity to connect with his wife, with his children, and it totally transformed their marriage. So I would highly recommend having time where you're not on the phone, making an effort to really connect with this person and have fun, right? Because like you said, it's hard to compete with all that a phone can provide, right? It's so hard to compete. It's interesting, it's funny, it provides everything. So we need to make even more of an effort to be playful. We have to make more of an effort to do fun activities together, to just keep the love and the excitement going. Or else, if you have nothing to share, you haven't read anything, you are just talking about the same thing over and over. So it's a responsibility of the spouse, okay, of disconnecting, putting the phone away. But it's also the responsibility of the spouse to be interesting. We have to continuously work on ourselves. We need to be reading. We need to be growing. And when you come into a relationship and you are interesting, you share like wonderful thing, whether it is news, whether it's new discoveries, whatever it is, you bring something to the table and keep your level of interest. Be interesting. Don't stop being fun and interesting.
One of the thing that I have seen among my clients that really work is
Mhm.
having a second honeymoon without the phone. So
Okay.
just go somewhere for a couple of days just without the
Yes.
phone. Just see, and it will increase your tawakkul on Allah. At the same time, you will have more
Mhm.
time, and you will see
Yeah.
that you can actually live without the phone, and it's okay. People
Right.
live without the
That's
phone
gonna
for
be
thousands of
hard.
years.
Right.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but some people are so conditioned to thinking that
Yes.
every 15 minutes they need to check the phone, and
Mhm.
every 30 minutes for them to move in any place they need Google Map. So sometimes
Mhm.
we are so conditioned to thinking that we can't survive without the phone. It actually affects the relationship, and
You're right.
it
No, you're
actually affects the way
absolutely
we
right.
talk about it with each other. So so sometimes just being without the phone, just going
Yes.
to the park with your wife without the phone, it's just important.
It
It's
is. It is. Because it's too tempting when it's in your hand, you're constantly looking at it. But being able to put it aside and going on a walk together, going out to dinner together without it, or at least making a commitment that, like, let's say you keep it in the car, right? Just for safety reasons.
uh-huh.
Just for
Right,
safety
right. No, I
reasons. You have it
understand.
in the car, but it is a great habit to be able to disconnect with devices and connect with your loved ones.
Absolutely. So the last point we'll talk about is
Mm-hmm.
that divorce.
Mm.
And divorce is a very, difficult but important topic again.
Yes.
So there are two extremes that we see in our community regarding divorce. One extreme is that divorce is always looked at as the, like the greatest disaster that can happen in someone's life.
Mm.
So divorce is demonized, divorce is
Mm.
bad, horrible. So you will die before you get divorced. So divorce is always looked at something that is cursed, or a divorced person is looked at like someone who's cursed. So that's definitely problematic, because divorce is sometimes a solution. At the same time, on the other extreme, sometimes every imperfection of life is looked at as very toxic and
Mm.
abusive, and sometimes men and women are getting out of marriage and becoming lonely and depressed, because
Right.
sometimes they see small imperfections in marriage and quickly think that, oh, I have a job, I have a house, so I can just get out of this
Mm.
toxic relationship and be independent. But then independence becomes a cave of loneliness. So
Mm.
some people are romanticizing divorce, which is a problem. Some
Right.
people are making divorce a demon, which is also a problem. So what can be a few guiding principles to
Mm.
understand that, is divorce right for me, or is divorce a problem for me?
Right. Yes, you bring up a very important issue. And I see the same thing, either people jumping to divorce over the smallest issues and constantly bringing it up, constantly threatening with it. And this is so damaging, right? It's like a
Uh-huh.
bulldozer. If you think of it as what is a wrecking ball
Right.
into your marriage. If you imagine your home, and as the marriage, symbolizing the marriage, and the divorce, just bringing up the word divorce is like a wrecking ball. It will cause instability and insecurity by bringing it up constantly over little things, right? So it's a matter of recognizing that Allah has made it permissible for us to get a divorce, because there are situations, if it is abusive, if it is toxic, and if you are constantly feeling belittled and disconnected and living in fear, then this is very traumatic. It's traumatic for you, it's traumatic for the children growing up in this situation. It's a matter of evaluating, right? Evaluating. Anyone who comes to me, they're on the brink of divorce, right? No one comes and says, oh, we're so in love and we just want to take us to the level of nirvana. No, I mean, everyone is on that brink of divorce, and they're desperate and they're sick of each other and they feel hopeless. So I always look at it and I tell them, well, give this one last try. I understand that you've tried everything that you know, but you haven't tried everything that is out there. And coming in with with the right mindset, with your heart in it, and trying this proven technique, proven methodology. And I tell them, I said, if you come in and you apply this, people actually go from brink of divorce to second honeymoon. And I tell them it's not a sales pitch. This happens, alhamdulillah, because this is a methodology that is effective. So I tell them, if you try that and see if change occurs, and sometimes one spouse is the only one motivated, and I tell them, I said, even if you're the only one working to save your marriage, you can save it. And it's shocking for people. Why? Because if you are changing yourself, your spouse is going to respond to you differently. They're going to respond differently. It's like a chemical reaction. If you change one substance, you're going to get something totally different, right? And so when I tell them to make these changes within themselves, and they do, and they're surprised. The lady who is crying in the first session saying, my husband's a narcissist, he doesn't help me, he sleeps in the other room. Then she makes a few changes within herself, and by the fourth session, she's smiling. It's like he's moved back into the bedroom, he helps with the kids, and we're being intimate again, right? And it all boils down to, are you making the changes within yourself, right? And so that's a very important process to go through. And many people do not do that. I've had people that I know who will just tell me, oh, we're getting a divorce. I'm like, have you seen a counselor? No. Have you tried to do a marriage program? No. They just give up, which is not right. You need to definitely seek professional help, go through a marriage program. And if there are no changes and the toxic relationship continues, then you need to evaluate it. And it's a very serious evaluation where you think about yourself, am I being the best version of myself? Is this marriage good for my dunya and my akhirah? Sometimes people will stay in a relationship. I have many cases of women overlooking, let's say, infidelity. They're like, okay, that's like, I forgive you. But they don't really forgive. And they're in this marriage and they actually become oppressive. And I tell them, you're losing your dunya and your akhirah. Because now all this anger, all this hatred, you're taking it out on him. And this is leading you to being the oppressor. So you have to look at the relationship and see, is this marriage actually being a source of khair? Is this leading me to Jannah, or is it leading me to the hellfire? If you're that miserable and you're that frustrated and that angry and you stay, you're definitely going to end up oppressing the other person one way or another. So it's about evaluating, can I change? Can I bring out the best in my spouse? Can I really take responsibility and have accountability? If you can, do that first before deciding on the divorce. Don't just call it quits without making an attempt, right? And then if it gets to a point where you're actually contemplating divorce, sometimes the best thing a person can do is get a divorce. And I tell my clients, obviously I've dedicated my life to helping people save their marriages, but there are situations, if I know that I can help someone get out of an abusive relationship where it's toxic, where there's fighting, where there's sometimes physical, I see that as successful as making it a happy home. It's just as successful to get out of that abusive relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, you explained it really well, So Jazakallah khairan for your time. And I think that these were very beneficial, and I enjoyed a lot, and I'm sure that people will benefit from it. So thank you, and stay blessed, and keep doing what you're doing, because you're definitely helping a lot of families function better.
Oh, Jazakallah khairan. It was a pleasure being on. Thank you for having me. And it was
Yep.
a very, very stimulating discussion. You brought up some really great points. And I pray that Allah puts barakat in all that you're doing in Bangladesh and around the world. And very nice getting to meet you.
Yep. Thank you. So next year we plan to do a program in USA because it was particularly in New York.
Okay.
So if it is possible, probably it is around June, July. So
Okay.
I'll give you a note beforehand. So if it is possible, maybe we can try to meet.
Yeah. Inshallah. Okay. June, we're usually in Lebanon visiting my in-laws, but July is definitely feasible, inshallah.
Okay. Inshallah. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.